Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, social marketers around the world. My name is Win Morgan, and as president of the International Social Marketing Association, it's both my privilege and pleasure to introduce the 19th in a series of webinars designed to advance social marketing teaching, research, and practice. And it's our first social marketing course fair today. We're excited about this. I'm here today with Jay Kassir, our organizer of this first annual course fair on social marketing. And Jay is our organizer of our webinar series as well as the chair of our ISMA membership committee of our board of directors. Now we'll begin in just a minute, but before we do, I'd like to share with you some timely updates through the International Social Marketing Association. First, make sure to mark your calendars for the World Social Marketing Conference, which will be held in the United States, 16th to 17th May 2017. There's a discount for ISMA members. It's being offered this time. For more information, go to http://wsmconference.com. And also, the 24th Social Marketing Conference will be held in June in Clearwater, Florida. More information is available at thissocialmarketingconference.org. And finally, last but not least, the third European Social Marketing Conference will be held in Finland the 22nd to the 23rd September. ISMA members will receive a 15% discount on registration, which, by the way, more than covers the cost of the annual membership. So get the discount code by visiting the ISMA website, logging in with your member details, and claiming your prize. Now I'd like to turn over the webinar to our organizer, Jay Kassir. Jay?
Thank you, Win, and welcome everyone. Let me get to my next slide here. Should be just about here, I think. Yes. So we have an exciting and full agenda for today's course fair webinars. We have 5 presenters in this webinar, and there's another session as well. And each presenter will give an 8-minute overview of their social marketing course offerings, and then we'll answer your questions at the end of their presentation. In between the 3rd and 4th presenter, if there's time, we'll have a discussion on the pros and cons of degree and certificate trainings as compared with non-certificate and no degree trainings. If we're running late, then we'll get back on time that way by not having that session. We'll be sticking very closely to the times on our schedule, so you'll know when to go for your washroom breaks and when to be in front of your screen. Please use the chat box to ask questions or make comments during the presenters' talks. We will read them back to you in roughly the same order as they come in during the webinar, and of course they'll be answered in that order. We also have an online form which you can use at any time during the webinar. So you can go ahead after a particular talk and say, oh, I like that. I'd like to get more information. Just use this URL here. After every talk, we will give it to you again, and you can click on there or at least go to it, however your system works, and say you would like more information afterwards, and you will be able to get it sent to you. I guess that brings us to the end then of the housekeeping. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker today, Matthew Wood from the University of Brighton in the UK. Matthew, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jay. Hello, everybody. As Jay said, I'm from the University of Brighton in the UK, and to give you some idea of where that is, and I'm going to try these techniques here. It's on the south coast of England, approximately there. London's up here. Some of you might have remembered Brighton from, I think, 2008 when it was the first World Social Marketing Conference, and at that time I was involved with the National Social Marketing Centre. I was part of the academic steering committee, and following on from the successful conference, I decided to get some courses running at Brighton Business School at the University of Brighton, and I'm going to very quickly sort of run through what we do at Brighton. So I'm going to start off with the Master's Program, and we have a full-time MSc Marketing program at Brighton Business School, pretty much a 12-month program which runs from sort of end of September through to October the following year. We've got a number of different pathways, one of which is social marketing. Most of the pathways share some sort of core modules, so I'm just going to run through the three terms. So the course is organised under a fairly traditional for England system of having three separate terms. So the first term runs up to Christmas, and the modules we offer are critical developments in marketing theory and practice. And in that module, we actually do an introduction to social marketing, and we introduce related issues like corporate social responsibility, course-related marketing ethics, etc. And students also do marketing planning and strategy. The second term, students do social marketing, and as we see, this is a module which is also shared with other postgraduate students who are doing a part-time certificate in social marketing. They do research methods for marketing, and then they can then choose an elective. And electives they can choose things like branding and communications, digital marketing, or international marketing. So some of those modules that you can see with the asterisks here, these are actually shared throughout all the different pathways. And in the third term, we offer a whole suite of electives for students, and the sorts of electives that are popular with social marketing students are things like behavioural economics. They can do ethics and social responsibility, business to business, digital, etc. They also do a further research methods module, which is either a qualitative research methods or quantitative, and that's linked to the proposed methodology for the dissertation. So after about May, June through to the end of the course, through to the end of September, the students will do a 40 credit, which is a sort of double weighted credit social marketing dissertation. So they can choose any sort of social marketing issue, and they have to go out and do literature, do research on that dissertation. So that was a very quick run through of the social marketing master's program. Now in addition, we also offer a postgraduate certificate in social marketing, and this is much more of a flexible program. So it's 60 credits, which in this country is about a third of a master's degree. They can take as little as 6 months or go up to 4 years to complete the program. They do social marketing as their core module, which is the same module which the full-time students take, and then they need a further 40 credits to complete the program. They can do that either through a work-based project, which is 40 credits. So obviously that's the idea of that is these are practitioners, they're probably working on a behaviour change project anyway, and they can sort of write that up and evaluate it for us. Or they can do further taught block modules. So all these modules tend to be organised on a block basis, which is convenient for people who are working. And again, they can do things like behavioural economics, they can do public health modules, health promotion, research methods, etc. And sort of finally, really, we also do some undergraduate social marketing, and we offer what we call a research elective. This is for final year business students. So half our students go out on placement and they write up a project, but the other half who don't do a placement, an industrial placement, have to do what we call a research elective, which is similar to a dissertation, but it's organised around a specific topic area, and it's run by tutors who have a specialism in that area. So one of these is social marketing. It's probably the most popular research elective we offer at Brighton. So this year we have about 40 students, but we typically get anywhere from 30 to 45 students taking this module. We do expect them to understand social marketing and behaviour change theory, and then we expect them to apply that to a particular issue and audience. We do insist they go out there and get insight through a mixture of qualitative and quantitative methods, and throughout the module they have to submit a proposal. Just before Christmas they have to do a poster presentation, and then they submit a final report, which is normally around about end of April, May. And that's it really. So that's social marketing at Brighton. We've got the full-time master's degree, we've got the part-time certificate, and we've got the undergraduate research elective module. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. That brings us in certainly within time, so we've got time for questions. And let me see if anyone has put any in here. Well, let's start with what opportunities do you provide for students to gain practical experience through your program?
Yeah, okay. There's two different ones. Obviously, there's the certificate program and the full-time marketing master's degree. So on the certificate, most of the students that go on there are actually working full-time. So what we're actually doing is supplementing their work experience by giving them the academic input, and then through the project, that's an amalgamation of what we're teaching on the module, and they tend to be applying that to their own projects and to their own workplace. On the full-time marketing degree, obviously part of the dissertation, part of the requirements of the dissertation, they do have to go out there and get primary research, and sometimes that involves getting research with stakeholders or working with stakeholders. What I try and do also is to organise internships. So for example, I work closely in a partnership with a behavioural change consultancy called the Campaign Company, who are based in Croydon, which is between London and Brighton. And I've successfully organised probably half a dozen internships for students. They go and work with TCC. They tend to do their dissertation in conjunction with TCC. And at least 2 of those have ended up with full-time employment with the Campaign Company. So it's a mixture really of the research opportunities, but also internships when they become available.
Okay, great. And what about scholarships? We have a question about, particularly in this case, international students. So if students from abroad wanted to come and do the master's, what sort of scholarship opportunities are available to them?
At the moment, there's not much, I'm afraid. When we had some, which was made through for the certificate, I had some funding again through the Campaign Company, the organisation I just mentioned. So they allocated some money for students who are working for non-profit organisations who weren't funded. At the moment, there's
and they could be international.
They could be international. Yeah, they could be from anywhere. So. For example, we currently have a Canadian student who's registered, and she's benefiting from that funding as we speak. On the full-time program at the moment, we don't have funding scholarship opportunities, unfortunately, but obviously that's something I will look at and see what I can do.
Great. What about another question here? You mentioned a number of the courses, which I think is very helpful. What if someone wanted some of the psychology background that goes into social marketing and behavior change? Yeah,
well, we tend to cover that in the module. For example, one of our key tutors is Professor Jeff French, who's a visiting professor here. So Jeff does a lot of input in terms of consumer behavior, consumer psychology. He also touches on the behavioral economics, and again, we go into that in more depth on the behavioral economics modules as well. But in other schools, we do actually have psychology modules. So if a student wanted to pick up a psychology module, that's perfectly okay. That's absolutely fine.
Who are the tutors that you use in your program?
Well, there's myself, and I suppose what I try and do is I go through the broad principles, but also because I'm reasonably active in terms of publishing and looking at the evolution of the discipline, I try and cover some of the more recent developments in social marketing. So I take perhaps a little bit more of an academic, theoretical perspective. We've got then Sarah Corke, who's a part-time lecturer here, but she also runs a social marketing agency called Brilliant Futures, who are pretty well known in this country. And she takes very much an applied practitioner perspective and goes through quite a lot of research she's doing herself and consultancy. We have Jeff French, who I've just mentioned, who most people will be familiar with. And so Jeff looks at things like, he looks at valuation, ethics, and he covers some of the behavioral economics and behavioral theory. We also try and bring in some practitioners and professionals who work for maybe research agencies or advertising agencies who specialize in social marketing. And I normally invite a couple of graduates to come back as well to talk about their experiences and what they've done since graduating.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Now, we'll be talking a little later, a little more about some of the pros and cons of offering a degree program like yours. One of the pros might be that you have an alumni that you start to form that serves as a network that's helpful to the people who are coming through your programs. Can you talk to that? Is that a plus for your program?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I mean, so certainly since I've started to invite people back to actually speak on the modules, and they are already starting to set up their informal networks. We have a very proactive alumni association here anyway at Brighton, so the social marketing aspects fits into that. But yes, it's an interesting network. And for example, on the certificate program, we had when we first started off back in 2009, we had a few Dutch students, and since then they tend to network with each other. And ever since then, we've normally had a good number of students from the Netherlands come on, and they sort of network with each other. On the full-time program, we've had a similar experience with some of the European students as well. So certainly the networks are forming, and to an extent it's partly through our own alumni channels, but I think it's also, they connect with each other and they're very proactive in doing that. Current students are running their own blogs, they're very active on Facebook, they invite their colleagues and their peers to participate in their blogs as well. So it's all really blossoming on that front.
I think we have time for one last question. Where do your students come from?
We've got a mixture of students, and again it depends if it's the full-time program or the part-time program. I'll give you an idea of what the students have currently. So on the full-time program, we have social marketing students from Canada, from Scandinavia, from the UK, and we've got one from the British Virgin Islands, that's probably a first. And on the postgraduate certificate program, we currently have a student from Belgium, we have a student from Greece, we have a student from Canada, a student from Ireland, and we've got a number of students from the UK.
So that's quite an international community that people will be joining if they join
the program. It is international, and the core module is the social marketing module. That's shared by not just social marketing students, but a number of MBA students choose that module. We have public health and health promotion master's students select that module. And it's a great mix. So we have a mix of disciplines. We have a mix of some are doing a certificate, some are doing a master's, some are doing MBAs. We have different nationalities, and some are full-time practitioners, others are full-time students. So it's a real interesting mix, and we've got a real interesting dynamic in the discussions.
Great. Well, thank you, Matthew. That's a great presentation on what you're offering. And reminding people that if you want more information from any of these presenters about their courses, their programs, you can just click on the URL throughout the webinar at any point, and you'll be able to ask for more to be sent to you. And then next, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Doug Mackenzie Moore of Mackenzie Moore Associates. Doug, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Let me just start off by giving a little bit of background. I'm an environmental psychologist, and I've spent the last 30 years or so looking at the application of knowledge from the behavioral sciences to the promotion of behavioral changes related to sustainability and related to health. And what I want to do is just very briefly introduce you to the approach that I take and then talk with you about the different sort of training options that I provide. So the genesis of a lot of the work that I do is the challenges or difficulties that are associated with designing, delivering programs to bring about health or environment-related behavioral changes that are solely information intensive. If we look at the environment, for example, the vast majority of behavioral change programs in place today make use of radio, television, the internet, and newsprint as ways to try to bring about changes in people's behavior. Those programs tend to be based upon one of two models of behavioral change. One of those is called the attitude behavior change approach, and something called economic self-interest. If I had to guess, I would guess that perhaps more than 80% of all the programs in place today focusing on environment or health-related behavioral changes make use of one or the other of these different approaches. And the reason why I'm raising that is we know quite convincingly from knowledge and psychology that neither of these approaches or models do a very good job of fostering behavioral changes related to sustainability or to health. And here are just two very quick examples. If we look at the attitude behavior change approach, for example, which suggests essentially if people know more and they care more, they'll change behavior. Here's an example of approach in which a community in the United States spent $50,000 producing a water use handbook. And interestingly, this handbook was distributed to only half of the community. Half of the community received it randomly. The other half randomly did not receive it. Every household in the community was individually water metered. And as you can see on the screen, there were no reductions in water usage. And we see findings like this again and again in literature, where people are making use of attitude behavior change approaches, but we're rarely actually seeing changes in people's behavior. The other approach is called economic self-interest. And this is an approach that comes out of economics. And at the base of this approach is a presumption that human beings are rational, and that all that someone needs to do, for example, utility, is present information to people that lets them know that some action that they could take, like installing a high-efficiency shower head, putting insulation in their attic, for example, purchasing a more fuel-efficient vehicle, that those things are in their financial best interest. And once people understand that, the presumption is that enlightenment will equal changes in behavior. And again, if we look at utility-based programs, almost all of their programs are based upon this presumption, that enlightenment around economics will equal changes in people's behavior. Let me show you just one example of this. This is the largest economic self-interest program that I know of in the world. It was a program that was mandated by the United States Congress, and it mandated that literally every utility, whether it was gas or electric, in the United States needed to provide interest-free, low-cost loans, listings of local contractors, and free audits to any household in the United States that requested one. And as you can see on the screen, only 6% of people requested audits. Of those people who actually went through the audit process, only half of them did anything, and the average energy savings, as you can see also, were just 2 to 3%. But they really weren't 2 to 3%, because when people dug deeper into this, they found that 30% of the people waiting to have an audit done engaged in exactly the same behavioral changes as the people who went through the audit process. What this means essentially, the United States spent several $billion delivering a program to only get 6% of households to request an audit, and only get 3% of them to actually act, where energy savings were less than 1% per household. So the two principal ways that both many environment and health-related behavioral change programs have been delivered in the developed world have been making use of an attitude behavior change approach and economic self-interest. The approach that I've been advocating for the last 25, 30 years or so is something I call community-based social marketing. And community-based social marketing merges together knowledge from the field of psychology, which is my background, with knowledge from the field of social marketing. It's based around 5 steps. And these 5 steps are now being broadly utilized in literally thousands of different types of programs. The first of these is very, very careful selection of which behaviors to go after. The second is uncovering what the barriers and benefits are to a particular behavioral change. We know conclusively now from research in psychology, the health field, that the barriers to behavioral changes are often very behavior specific. We see less variability on the benefit side, but we see a lot of variability on the barrier side. And so the second step of community-based social marketing is to make sure that we understand the barriers to very specific and discrete behaviors, because without having that knowledge, it's very difficult for us to develop effective strategies. Third step is to develop strategies to try to lower the barriers and try to enhance people's benefits or reasons for engaged in behavior. The fourth step is to pilot test the programs, testing several different strategies against each other. And the fifth step is to broad-scale implementation. Now, in the workshops that I deliver, we cover these 5 steps: how to select behaviors, how to identify barriers and benefits, how to develop effective strategies, how to pilot test them, and how to move on to broad-scale implementation. And there are 3 different types of workshops that I provide. The first is a 2-day introductory workshop that introduces people to those 5 steps. The second is an advanced workshop, which is also 2 days in length and has the introductory workshop as a prerequisite for it. And the third is something I call a master's class. And the master's class is pretty interesting. It's done one-on-one, in which I coach people through these 5 different steps as they deliver their first community-based social marketing programs. I've just started offering the master's class recently, and I've had about 25 people go through it. It's a really useful way if you're an agency and wanting to be able to implement CBSM programs to begin to be coached as you work your way through the first process. So Jay, that's it. Any questions or conversation about any of what I've presented?
Your questions and comments box here then, or slide. Let's see if anyone's put any questions in yet. I would encourage all of you to just put your questions in as we're going through the talks, but we can certainly take them at this point as well. Doug, can you start by telling us a little bit more about how CBSM, or community-based social marketing, differs from social marketing in general?
Sure, a great question. Social marketing, Jay, as you know, has its roots in the field of marketing. And community-based social marketing very much has its roots in psychology. And what it attempts to do is to blend together knowledge from psychology, and more specifically from environmental psychology, with knowledge from the field of social marketing. And so it's trying to blend together basically the best ideas from both. It very much uses the process of social marketing, of doing foundational research, developing strategies, and then pilot testing them before going out to broad-scale implementation. I think where it goes a little further is that community-based social marketing provides very clear guidance on how to select behaviors. And in the introductory and advanced workshops, we dig into that in a lot of detail in trying to work out of the multitude of behaviors that we could go after, which behaviors are most worthwhile for us to pursue. I'd say the other area in which it differs more by degree is in the third step of developing strategies. There's a lot of detail in my workshops around how to make use of knowledge coming out of the behavioral sciences, and particularly social psychology, around the use of commitments, prompts, norms, social diffusion, topic areas that have been really extensively studied in the field that I have my background in.
Thank you, Doug. So we have more questions coming in here. Let's see. How do you teach about integrating CBSM practices into low-income communities?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nora. Segmentation is a really important part of delivering any type of strategy, whether it be social marketing or community-based social marketing. The way that I look at that is to try to understand what I call the behavioral chain. And this is sort of, I think, a unique part of what we're delivering in the community-based social marketing workshops. Here's a behavioral chain. If you wanted someone to be involved in backyard composting, you would break backyard composting down to its specific discrete units. Someone, first of all, has to intend or want to begin being involved in backyard composting. Secondly, they have to go out and purchase a composter. Third, they have to transport the composter back to their home. Fourth, they have to put it together. Fifth, they have to find some type of container that they're going to put their kitchen scraps into. Sixth, they have to start putting those kitchen scraps into the backyard composter. Seventh, they have to start mixing them in with yard waste. And then eighth, they need to stir the composter. And then finally, they need to harvest the compost and put it under the gardens or under the lawns. Now, the reason why behavioral chains are really important, Nora, is that they help us to think about different segmented audiences and the challenges that they might have with engaging different aspects of that behavioral chain. And so when you're doing your bear and benefit research, we want to be asking, are there different and distinct barriers that with respect to different economic groups, or with respect to different neighborhoods, or there may be other characteristics that are important in looking at helping us to understand who may have barriers specific to some of those different items in that behavioral chain that we need to be thinking about addressing. And can we then create segmented groups and deliver different and distinct programs for them that do a better job of addressing their barriers.
Thank you, Doug. Stacia asks, can you give some examples of specific behavioral barriers and how you've been able to overcome them? And I don't know if it was just as an example or specific interest. She says, regarding, for example, what were some reasons that people didn't recycle glass, and how are you able to overcome those behaviors, or those barriers, rather? I think she meant.
Yeah, I don't know if I can speak specifically to the recycling of glass, Stacia, but I think it's very important when we think about encouraging people to be involved in residential recycling, that we don't think of recycling as being one unitary behavior, but instead we think of it as being a whole series of what I just described as being behavioral chains. We have a behavioral chain, for example, with respect to corrugated cardboard. We have another behavioral chain with respect to newsprint, another one with respect to glass, another one with respect to office paper or homework paper. And we need to understand what those behavioral chains are. We need to understand what the barriers are to each of the items in those behavioral chains. So for example, I did a project a number of years ago in Sonoma County, and we were looking at fiber content and the fact that fiber content was not being very well recycled in Sonoma County. One of the items that we were seeing way overrepresented in the garbage stream rather than the recycling stream was homework paper and office paper. And when we dug into that further, we found that people were not separating at source paper that they were using in their home offices. And we asked them, would you be willing to take a separate container and put it into those rooms? People told us bluntly no. They didn't have enough space. They aesthetically didn't like them. So we ended up instead providing them with dividers that allowed them to divide their existing containers so that half of it could be used for recycling and the other half for garbage stream. And as soon as we did that, we saw a large uptick in the amount of material, fiber content that was being recycled in our pilot areas. So again, really important to be able to think of recycling as not being one particular action, but a whole series of different behavioral chains, and then trying to understand the barriers that exist to each of those different items for each of those behavioral chains, and then develop the programs accordingly.
I think we may have time for just one more question for you now, Doug, but you're going to stick around until the end of the webinar, right? If we have time at the end, you'll be able to answer some more then?
Yeah, certainly will.
Okay, great. So I think we'll take Debbie's because I haven't seen one from her yet, so apologies to Nevin. Do these same psychological models underlying sustainable behavior change in a corporate setting? Just because it appeared on me.
Yeah, sorry, I got the message. I was reading as well, Jay. Great question. What I think is really interesting about much of the work that's happened in this field is so much of it, as you're suggesting through your question, Debbie, is focused on residential rather than corporate settings. And I think Jay would say the same thing because Jay does a lot of CBSM work. What's really interesting about corporate settings is that many of the tools that we might use from psychology, social diffusion, social norms, commitments, for example, work in many ways more effectively in corporate settings. We have people who are spending a lot of time together day in, day out. And our ability to encourage behaviors like reducing energy, reducing waste, reducing water usage, altering people's transportation choices, in many ways we can deliver those programs more effectively in corporate settings. For example, we can gain group commitments for people in cafeteria settings to properly dispose of organic material, to make sure that that material is being composted. We can be gaining commitments from people to be riding the bus once or twice a week or to be using carpooling, and we can place those commitments in close proximity to where people work. And by simply doing that, enhance the development of social norms and people's sense of that other people in my office space believe or expect that these are behaviors I should be engaged in. There's a lot that we can do, as I've suggested, in corporate settings that is more challenging often than in residential settings. So a number of the tools that I and Jay talk about, we can do actually more effectively in those types of settings.
Thanks, Doug. I think we're going to have to move along now. I promised we'd stay on schedule. So remember that you can request more information on Doug and his training programs just by clicking on this link at any time during the webinar. And we'll move on then to Peter Mitchell. Peter, my pleasure to welcome you. Over to you.
Okay, thanks a lot. And I'm going to move these slides now. Hi, I'm Peter Mitchell, and I work at a social marketing firm called Marketing for Change. We do marketing, communications, and advocacy work, mostly here in the U.S. About a third for the federal government, a third for nonprofits and foundations, and a third for commercial enterprises. Unlike some of the others you've heard from, our main focus is not training, it's conducting research, designing campaigns, and building products. But we do training all the time, typically for organizations that want an entire team to up their game in the arena of social marketing. We call our core methodology, that is the way we approach social marketing, fun, easy, and popular, a description we've taken from one of my mentors, Bill Smith. The basic idea is that there are common behavioral determinants that drive behavior, and it makes sense to explore all those options in a way to make an impact. I'm not going to go into the details of that despite the generous 8 minutes I have, but you can learn more at funeasypopular.com. What we try to do with our approach is to break out of this tired formula, one that assumes that people need to become aware of a problem and our suggested solution. We work on problems where awareness isn't enough, and persuasion has not been successful. The issue with the awareness-focused approach is we end up focusing on problems. No one wants more problems. This is not what people are shopping for. This shows you a little about what we do instead. Instead of telling people what to think, this top right quadrant, we focus on helping people do something, which is why we often develop products that help people do something instead of just messages about why they should do it. Our training, as I said, is different. Our training is not built for individual learning. It is meant to build the capacity of a team. It's not about what individuals know, it's about what teams can do. So an individual would not enroll, an organization would contract with us to build the capacity of their team. We think it's tough for an individual to make a difference with a team of colleagues who are coming from a whole different place. That's why we focus on teams. So now I want to describe the 4 types of trainings we do. The first we call Behavior Change 101. Behavior Change 101 gives a team a foundation in behavior change marketing. But they don't learn just through hearing about it. They learn by doing, by applying the concepts to real problems. Behavior Change 201 is for a team that already has foundational knowledge of behavior change. This is about expanding their expertise and institutionalizing that approach in the office. So not just learning stuff, but actually changing how the office works. So we want to help an organization build processes and templates that incorporate the behavior change marketing approach into their day-to-day work. Third is advocacy, and this really takes the behavior change approach but applies it to the idea of advocacy. And the basic concept here is it's not about winning an argument. A lot of advocacy seems to be about winning an argument. But a lot of arguments get won, and yet change doesn't happen. We think the key is being on our side, being on the side of the advocates want you on, to be more fun, easy, and popular, and therefore more people will do it. And so a lot of this is used for people that instead of trying to win over, a certain vote or something, trying to build a grassroots support for their issue that may not be top of mind for a lot of people. The last thing is really both a training and an intervention in itself. And this is to solve a specific problem working with all the stakeholders. It's done with big groups, sometimes 20, 30, 40, 50 people. You get all the key people together and we bring you through a day-long or a half-day session, and we try to synthesize the research that's been done to date, so there's some pre-work done, and then work on with folks to develop a plan for the solution. So you emerge at the end of the day with a plan. And I think I met my minutes. I may have beaten my 8 minutes, which, of course, being fast is fun, easy, and popular.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. We certainly have some time for questions. So would people go ahead and put your questions in for Peter? Other than we have some questions on the slides, but not for you. Can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned that you really focus on teams. Is it right that you don't have any training for individuals then?
Right. So if one person, and there's great stuff out there. I mean, I think Doug's and Nedra's are both great examples of stuff that individuals can enroll in that is super helpful, and we feel like that's really done well. And there's programs at universities and so on now, a lot more than, say, when I got into this back in the 90s. But it's so we work with organizations that want to change how a team is working together, and we feel like that's where we can make the most difference. We did this with, for example, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration in the federal government to bring the whole team in for, I guess we did like 8 sessions with them. It was pretty extensive. But the idea was, how do we incorporate this in the way they're looking at all of the things that they're trying to do, in this case in the transportation space.
Is it all face-to-face?
Yeah, it's we've always done it. Yeah, basically it's all face-to-face with some follow-up stuff that's done either by Google Hangout in our case or phone to be checking in, and people say, okay, now that we're doing this, we have other questions. So there's consulting that comes afterwards.
So in this case, we have an international group we're talking to. If someone outside the United States wanted to make use of these training opportunities, would a group of them have to fly to your office, or would you fly to their office? How does it work?
Opposite way. I mean, they're welcome to fly to us, but typically we go to wherever the client is. So we do this all over the country, and I've done some internationally, but mostly here domestically. But it's we go to them. Yeah.
Okay. One thing you haven't done, and some people might appreciate, can you give us some ballpark idea of cost for these kinds of workshops?
So they go anywhere from, I don't know, $5,000 to $25,000. Obviously, it depends on the number of participants, amount of time. Something like a Behavior Change 101 is pretty inexpensive. These are U.S. dollars. And then there's the travel, whatever the travel costs are for the team. Usually it's two of us that go and put on the workshop.
Okay. I don't see any other questions yet, so Wynn, I would suggest that you could go ahead. Thank you very much, Peter, and I suggest Wynn, you could go ahead and start the discussion at any point.
Sure, and let's remember to, if you want to learn any more information about any of the presenters' course offerings, you can just go to bit.ly.com/SM course information. You can fill out a request form for the ones that you want, and you'll be sent information from there. And now it's your turn, and you can give your comments and your questions about something that's near and dear, I think, to all of our presenters' hearts, and that's the pros and cons of degree and certificate courses. So like at Brighton and Westminster, we provide degree and certificate courses. At McKinsey Moore, Salter Mitchell, and Tools of Change, we provide non-certificate courses. So the question is to put to you presenters is, what do you think the pros are of degree and certificate courses, that is authenticated certificate courses, as compared with non-degree and non-certificate courses? Then we'll hear some of the cons as well.
And I would certainly encourage participants to put in their comments into the chat box while we're doing that.
Well, I'll kick it off because I'm probably the least informed, so I'll somebody can build on me. This is Peter Mitchell, and I think that it kind of depends on where you are and what you want to do. So we hire people all the time to do work in social marketing, and I think it matters if you have a fairly junior level person you have and they have a degree or a certification. I think that carries some weight with us, I know. Whereas, course, having gone through a course may not be as rigorous or as long a thing that they have done. Although still helpful. In this field, there's a lot of people that don't have that kind of certification or anything. So having that is a big step up.
Okay, Matt from Brighton. I'll just throw in a few things into the pot. I mean, I think one of them's an obvious one. I think students, individuals like the certificate. They like the badge of authenticity and the seal of approval that a university qualification gives them. And I think it's one of our competencies what universities do, and we're good at setting learning objectives, designing a syllabus, and assessing against those objectives. So I think it's something we do particularly well, and I think some students like that. I mean, for example, on my certificate course, which in theory is, I suppose, a fairly modest level for a postgraduate qualification, we've had several master's students and even PhDs have still wanted to go on and actually come out with a certificate rather than just doing a training program. I think some of the other probably benefits have come up before. One is the mix of students. So we get a mix of students from different nationalities, different degrees, different occupations. So I think I think they learn an awful lot from being in that sort of environment.
And an alumni that comes from all of that too.
Oh, sorry, what was that, Jay?
I was just saying, and an alumni that comes from all of that too.
And the alumni, yeah. So they become part of the sort of the networks that we talked about earlier on. And I hope what we also do is give a good mixture of theory and practice. So I think the theoretical side is very important. You'd expect that from a university. We try and keep up with theoretical developments and introduce the latest ideas, but we also ensure the students actually think about applying that to their own situation, their own work, their own interests, their own dissertations. And I think that balance of up-to-date theory and practice is something we also do particularly well.
If I might jump in here too. Excuse me. This is Danielle Caldwell with Westminster College. And if I, excuse me, I'm a little under the weather today. I agree with everything that you just said, Matt. And if I can jump off of that as well, something that I think that hasn't been mentioned yet that can also add a level of credence to graduate programs and undergraduate programs for that matter is the ability to change direction and go to work in a new field. You know, a lot of people probably taking this webinar will have some background information or background experience in social marketing or communications, but there might be those of you who are looking to switch into the field of social marketing or communication and are looking for a way to do that. And so by doing it through a degree program, it kind of adds a level of credibility and depth with the material that you're really wrestling with and learning about to get that foundational knowledge and that foothold perhaps in a new field.
Good point. And I would also say as a practitioner that I have certainly come across requests for proposals a number of times, usually from government, where a certain training or expertise is required. And they may allow you to substitute experience, but certainly one of the ways of proving that you have the right background is, and sometimes you have to have a certain educational background in order to get the contract.
Jay, can I jump in instead?
Sure.
Please do.
Yeah, I've been on both sides of this. I was, taught at both the graduate and undergraduate level, and there are many pluses, as have been mentioned by my co-presenters, for undergraduate and graduate degrees in these areas. But I want to speak to sort of, I think, one of the pluses that I really see on the training side. One of the real advantages that I see to the types of classes that Peter was talking about, where he's doing training for a whole agency, which I've done a fair amount as well, is the ability to create a cultural change within an agency. There's obviously absolutely no way that we would get 50 or 60 staff within an agency to go and take degree courses. We might hope that a few of them perhaps might. But in those cases where we would like to see people beginning to apply knowledge from the behavioral sciences to design and deliver their programs, in-house trainings is one of the most efficient and quickest ways for us to be able to do that, to have people be able to alter the way they think about program delivery, alter the conversations that they have. We can do that quite quickly through non-degree courses that are being offered in agencies or more broadly for a variety of people. So I want to suggest that the two complement one another. I often see in the work that I do people doing trainings with me who then get excited about the ideas and then want to go and take degree courses. And I think that's really helpful to be able to use training classes we might provide as a stepping stone for people then to get deeper understanding from the different programs that have been mentioned in this presentation.
Doug and Peter, let me ask you this question. I mean, the trainings that you offer are...
Excuse me, Wynn, is there a reason why you're not including me?
And Jay. Yeah, because Jay, you're always there. Thank you. And Jay, one of the, I don't think that you do any testing or certifying at the end of your programs, as we do in competency-based training. Was that a conscious choice on your part, or have you ever considered doing it in the future?
We do something a little simpler, where we have sort of pre-post tests. So people say, give us an idea of how comfortable they are doing something and what they do. And then at the end of the 2 days, we'll do it at the end of each day of what their perception is afterwards. So it's not a test like they're not being giving a test on what their knowledge is, but we are measuring their self-assessment of what they know.
And sorry, are you done, Peter? When what I do now, my master's class is I do give people a certificate at the end of it because in order to complete the whole process with me, they have to do behavior selection, they have to do foundational research, they have to develop strategies, and they have to pilot test them. So, they're learning the material and they're applying the material, and so I'm coaching them all the way through that process. So I do provide a certificate for the master's class. I don't do it, our master's coaching. I don't do it for the introductory and advanced because I don't think it would be appropriate in those situations.
And I would say that speaks to one of the advantages of the non-certificate, non-degree courses, which is if you're quite short on time or money, you can do something very quickly with not a large capital outlay with some of the shorter, less expensive options, training options. And often you can focus or review or get comments on, let's say, one particular topic or aspect that you want to work on, rather than having to take an entire course.
Yeah, can I just jump in quickly on that point, because I agree with those points. Actually, what we're trying to do is at Brighton is form a hybrid model. So our core social marketing module is 4 block days, but we from this year we're going to split it into 2, and essentially, 2 of those days would be a sort of introduction, but the other 2 days would be more like training, and we would certainly would offer that to organisations. So it would be very similar to training, but they would also get the credits towards the qualification if that's what they're interested in. And another point I think just worth throwing in is I'm currently working with Phil Holden from the University of Greenwich, where they have some social marketing on behalf of the European Social Marketing Association. What we're trying to do is to develop a set of core principles or competences for social marketing, and we will then be able to, if you like, evaluate either academic courses or indeed training courses against those criteria, so they could then get accreditation with the European Social Marketing Association. And hopefully we're working towards there'll be a sort of a qualification that the social marketing associations, and including the International Social Marketing Association, could offer, and credits would then be interchangeable between training, between academic institutions, and between the association's qualifications as well.
Oh, that's great to know, Matthew. We've been talking about moving forward with some of that work with ISMA, so it's good to know that you're already doing some of it.
Great, thank you.
Ask one more question, and this is particular for our folks at Brighton and Westminster, Matt and Danielle, before we move on. Is I got my master's in public health from Johns Hopkins. I think it was in 1989, and that seems to be doing me it gives me a lot of purchase, I think, and credibility whenever I meet with other folks. But public health has changed so much since 1989, and sometimes I wonder at the value of the degree. Do you think that degrees and certificates should be time-bound, and you should do some continuing education to re-up for your degree, or do you think that they should be just terminal? Once you get them, you're good.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I think you probably could argue some updating. I suppose, for example, I'm increasingly involved with the public health programs at Brighton, and I suppose it's only recently that the people who deliver public health, and that's within the medical school at Brighton, they've only in the last sort of few years considered social marketing relevant and important. So it shows that, I imagine when you did your programs earlier, social marketing and understanding the consumer was not really part of the syllabus.
Well, and something that I'll say, and I know I haven't really presented on our program yet, that the approach that the Master of Strategic Communication program at Westminster takes is, I think, less bound in current content related to social marketing and communication, and more focused around a process. And so in that way, I think that creates kind of more of an evergreen educational experience for this program, because it is very process-based, and it really gets students into the processes and wrestling with concepts as applied to how you approach communication issues strategically. So in that way, I get your point that there might be time-bound aspects of the content, but I think that approaches, as long as you know how to approach an approach, but also how to evaluate your approach, I think that those are skills that you gain that really serve you long past the content, or the time that the content becomes antiquated.
Well, okay. Well, thank you all. I'm going to be conscious of time bound as well, and we're going to move on to our next presenter. I'll remind you that if you have any more questions or you want to request more information, that you can go to bit.ly/SM course information. And now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce one of our presenters, Jay Kassir from Tools of Change. Jay?
Thank you, Win. So I'll be talking about Tools of Change webinars. And to be clear, in contrast to some of the other trainings you'll be hearing about today and tomorrow, we don't offer degrees or certificates. Now, as we've just discussed, there are advantages and disadvantages to that. Some of the advantages are that there are no prerequisites, assignments outside of the webinar time, and no costs and disruptions from travel and accommodation. That's what we aren't. So let's take a look at what we are. Each year, we run 2 series of practical, highly interactive 60 and 90-minute webinars that are globally accessible and that cover key aspects of social marketing and community-based social marketing, or CBSM, that Doug talked about. I've been delivering these instructional webinars for 13 years now, and you can check out my experience at the URL provided here. Let me tell you about our webinars. Our 90-minute instructional webinars cost $70 US and are introductory. They're designed for those with 3 or less years of experience with social marketing. Not just those doing it or about to do it, but also, we've been talking about team building, those who supervise social marketers and work with them. You can arrange for customized presentations delivered to your group or workshop only, or you can choose from a range of pre-scheduled webinars that can be taken in any order. And that's something we didn't talk about also. This kind of a format is also very useful for university instructors. So for example, we have people who teach nature conservation classes, and once each year they will pop into our Introduction to Social Marketing webinar with their class. And again, there's no charge if you have additional people with you sharing your facilities. Let me go through these for you. So in the introduction webinar, you learn about the language and key concepts of social marketing and community-based social marketing. You hear about their evolution and roles in the intervention continuum. You'll apply exchange theory to your own planning situation and then participate in a game of Know Your Audience, which helps to explain to managers and partners why you need to do at least some audience research. You'll review a case study that illustrates the stages of planning a program while reviewing the CBSM guidelines for selecting behaviors, which, as Doug says, is quite important. And then you'll be introduced to the synergistic tools of change emphasized in community-based social marketing, the social psychological tools Doug was talking about, and we'll apply one of these tools, prompts, to the behavior you want to promote. In our webinar Introduction to Formative Research, Targeting Your Audience and Overcoming Barriers, you learn or review the basics of conducting formative research, audience segmentation, and pre-testing, even on a limited budget. You learn how to identify the key barriers that could otherwise discourage your target audience from making the desired changes, as well as the motivators that you'll need to talk to in order to engage their interest. You'll get simple, practical tools and advice for conducting, supervising, and using the research. And finally, you'll hear about proven techniques for overcoming common barriers and see how various programs overcame unique barriers. In another webinar in this series, you can learn it or review why and how to craft communications that are as vivid, personalized, credible, and empowering as possible, and hear specific tips for working with the general public, referendums, workplaces, and youth. In our webinar Incentives and Norms, you'll learn about the main risks when using incentives, such as lack of spillover to other behavior and undermining intrinsic motivation, and also how to manage those risks. You'll also get advice about time horizons and the type and value of incentives to consider. You'll also hear about the benefits of norm appeals and the key differences between descriptive and injunctive norms. You'll learn again about the main risks, such as contrarian segments and descriptive and injunctive norms that cancel each other out, and also how to manage those risks. In building motivation over time, you'll learn about or review the 3 key elements of engagement, the roles of repetition, habits, context, and behavioral cues, and also stages of change theory. In addition, you'll learn how and why to use some particularly helpful tools of change, namely feedback and recognition, word of mouth, and norm appeals, and obtaining a series of increasingly demanding commitments. Finally, in our Introduction to Impact Measurement and Evaluation webinar, you'll learn or review in a very practical, introductory way how to develop a logic model, set your evaluation frame and SMART objectives, and how to design measures for monitoring as well as evaluation. In terms of research design, you'll hear how and why to triangulate, use baselines, and attribute your measured impacts to your program using randomly selected control groups, comparison groups, staggered baseline designs, and reversal designs. You'll also get guidance on measuring cost effectiveness and determining your evaluation budget. These webinars follow Doug's community-based social marketing framework, so post-webinar resources are available on his CBSM website and in his books, as well as on our own Tools of Change website shown here. And we illustrate the theory using the best examples from our site's case bank of over 150 full-length case studies. Further, the entire framework, as Doug said, blends well with contemporary approaches to social marketing and behavior change programming. I also provide links throughout each webinar to further advanced reading, and at no extra cost, participants can call me within 6 months. It says 3 months there, but I'm offering 6 months after each webinar to discuss any of the points raised in the webinar. Our other series of webinars features 60-minute case studies of leading-edge programs delivered by the program organizers themselves and with a Q&A session at the end. These webinars cost only $50 US, and their recordings and written transcripts become publicly available at no charge on our Tools of Change website 6 months after each webinar takes place. Both series are easily shareable with colleagues, managers, contractors, and partners. So as some of the other panelists pointed out as well, this kind of training is great for team development, staff training, and building understanding of and support for your work from your managers and coworkers. It doesn't cost any more to have additional participants join you at your location for the live webinars or to watch the video recordings afterwards, up to 6 months afterwards. And we also have, as I mentioned, university instructors who join us, so you can do it that way too in terms of adding in people. Now, as I mentioned before, we have a 13-year track record, and the webinars have consistently been rated highly. Looking at the data from the last 528 completed confidential post-webinar evaluations, it's clear that we meet or exceed expectations, help participants plan and deliver more effective programs, or at least that's what they say to us after taking the training, and are rated favorably compared with other telephone and web-based workshops on any topic that participants have taken previously. The gray bar, second from the bottom, represents people who had not participated in a telephone or web-based workshop before, and the black bar below that is the number who also provided comments. So we did pretty well on that rating as well. Of the many positive evaluation comments we receive each year, we focus on on a high level of interactivity, the helpful tricks of trade that are included, the opportunity to apply the theory to your own work and get feedback during the webinar, and the stability and ease of use of our webinar system. You can get more details by going to our website at the URL shown here, and you can also ask to be put on our webinars update mailing list. We've completed now our season of scheduled live webinars for this year, and now on break until we start again in September. But in the meantime, customized live webinars and video recordings with or without live Q&A are still available. And once you're on our mailing list, then we'll contact you in September, then once a month until about this time of year when we go on break once again. Well, thank you very much. I think I still have time for questions. So let's see.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jay. And I must remind you, please enter your questions using the chat box. And if you do have unanswered questions, we'll answer them as part of our website forum discussion after the webinar. Jay, I've got a question for you. You know, my schedule changes more than anyone I know. And what happens if my schedule changes and I can't take a webinar that I paid for?
Well, you have a number of options, actually. We do offer people that we will refund their money if they want once. But, I mean, for that kind of a reason, we'll do it once. But we rarely have people take us up on that. Usually what happens is people will either listen to the recording and then take us up on the live Q&A afterwards, or they will just use that towards another webinar.
And do you have scholarships for poor people like some of the people I know?
Well, what I will say is we never want lack of resources, funding, to be a reason why people are not having access to this information. And people just have to contact our registrar. We do have a limited number of free seats at every single webinar, and they're being used constantly.
Okay. You know, one of the problems that we have, since we're an international organization, is that we have people from Africa and from parts of Southern Asia and even parts of Washington, D.C. who have poor internet connections or services. What if I have poor internet connection or services? Will I still be able to take your webinar?
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about the internet service, the web service that we webinar service, that we use, and that is that it preloads the slide decks and everything onto people's computers. And because we're not doing live video feeds, we're just using pictures, still pictures, and text and so on. It's a very minimal bandwidth, and as I say, it loads ahead of time in caches. So we find we have no problems at all with people in those settings.
So I don't have to dress up to participate in your webinars?
No, we don't use videos.
Okay. That's great. So who's taking your webinars? What kind of people are using your services?
Well, it's interesting because we ask them at the beginning of the we do a poll, you know, what background they have and how many years they've been doing social marketing, and we get a real range. We get a whole bunch of people who it's for the first time that they're doing it. We get some people who think that they're going to learn about social media, so they're like real beginners. Then like we get people who have been doing it for 3 years, 4 years. Usually if it's more than 3 or 4 years, they're coming with other people that they're wanting them to learn from it. Or the other thing that sometimes teams will do it together, or people will do it together for brainstorming. So even if they have more experience, they're doing it just to go over the ideas in their mind of a particular aspect with the help of the webinar. And as I said, we even have some university professors or instructors who have their classes join us that way too.
Well, Jay, that's fascinating. You are a treasure trove of information for those of us who are, as I like to say, recovering public health professionals or health information people. And we really do thank you. And if you want more information on this or any other of the presenters, again, just go to bitly.com/SM course information. And with that, you know, as I said, Jay is also one of our moderators. So, Jay, I'm going to turn it back to you so that we can turn it over to Danielle Caldwell.
Yes, okay, I'll do that right on. It's my pleasure to welcome Danielle Caldwell, speaking about Westminster College's programs. Danielle, over to you.
Thanks so much, Jay. Let's see, am I driving? Okay. So, like you mentioned, I am Danielle Caldwell. I am a lecturer with the Master of Strategic Communication program at Westminster College. I am also a graduate of this program, so I can speak from both the faculty side and from the alumni side as well about the program. So a little bit about our college. We are a private liberal arts college located in Salt Lake City, Utah in the United States. I know that there is also a Westminster College in the UK, and that is not us. We're in the Western United States. Those of you who might remember the 2002 Winter Olympics, that happened in Salt Lake City, Utah, so that's kind of our pride and joy story we like to say about our location. We were founded in 1875, and our institution offers both undergraduate and graduate programs. And a little fun fact, 10% of the U.S. Olympic team at the 2014 Winter Olympics actually came from Westminster College. So we're very inundated in the Winter Olympic atmosphere. But about the program, like I said, I am going to be talking today about the Master of Strategic Communication program. This is a degree program, and it's a 5-semester graduate level program that is conducted over 18 months, kind of following the semester structure, but we call them sequences instead of semesters, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that means. There's many things I could talk about with this program, but a few things that I'm going to focus on are the self-directed nature of it. The learning process in this program is very iterative. It's competency-based, also project-based for those of you who might be more familiar with that term. Low residency is another term that we like to use for online. We prefer low residency to online for a number of reasons that I'll touch on here in a minute. But we also have a very high-touch approach to how the faculty interact with students. There's a lot of mentoring and a lot of coaching that goes on in this program, and we kind of err on the side of that as opposed to a lot of content instruction. And every step of the way through each sequence, you're getting real-world application of the concepts that you're learning through client-based projects. And these can be, these clients are chosen by our students, and they're chosen in a number of different fields. We've had students working in traditional marketing and PR, in social marketing, behavior change, public health. All these different areas are applied through these client-based projects. So a little bit more about the format. It's a 5-semester format. We have fall and spring admission. So the fall semester starts late August and runs through December. The spring semester starts in January and runs through April. It's 18 months intensive, so there is no semester off in there. You're pretty much going straight through for 5 semesters. And the sequences, rather than featuring different courses, actually follow a structure that is based around a certain theme. So each of the 5 sequences is theme-based. The first one deals a lot with what is strategic communication, and the different elements like rhetoric and crisis communication and branding, how all of those things interact in the form of strategic communication. The second sequence is about visual branding and communication design. So a lot of the visual aspects to any kind of communication are explored through the concepts of this second sequence. The third sequence talks about organizational strategy and research. And actually I don't know that I love the term organizational strategy, but this sequence really deals with how communication plays out within systems. So whether that system is an organization or whether it's around an issue or a ballot initiative, or how all those different systems interact with each other and how communication takes place there. This is also the place where there's a pretty heavy primary and secondary research component, so we do the graduate research methods through this sequence as well. However, those research processes are taking place throughout each of the 5 sequences. The fourth sequence is about strategic marketing communications and integrated marketing communications, and how those concepts can really inform your approach to a particular communication problem or project. And then the program concludes with a capstone sequence. So any kind of graduate thesis that you're wanting to pursue through the program, if there's any loose ends that you want to tie up in this last sequence, that's what this sequence is for. So a little bit more about the self-directed learning nature of this. So really the mastery that is assessed throughout this program is less related to content and more related to core concepts and core processes, and how you really approach any kind of communication objective is how learning is assessed. So like I mentioned before, the learning process is very iterative. We don't assign grades. It's pretty much you do your project and you're getting mentored by your coach one-on-one until your work is up to a level that the instructor feels that you have mastered the core concepts. Like I said, it's also a cumulative competency-based model. So everything that you're learning, once you learn it, you are then applying it over and over and over again throughout the program. So you're really getting a lot of experience with the core concepts through wrestling with them rather than just learning about them. Low residency, high touch. So what I mean by low residency is that classroom instruction is limited to 5 weekend workshops. And those weekend workshops are really what kick off each of the project sequences. Now this classroom instruction can be conducted remotely for out-of-state and out-of-country students. So this is something that you do not have to move to Salt Lake City, Utah to participate in this program. This is something that you can conduct all over the world at your own pace, within your own time frame, as long as you're able to work on that one-on-one instruction with your faculty mentor. And like I mentioned, there's a lot of one-on-one faculty mentorship. A lot of this learning in this program really happens through iteration and through revision of the projects and through one-on-one conversations. So you get a lot of really high-level, high-touch interaction with the faculty members. Real-world application, like I mentioned, each sequence features a number of real-world client projects that you're doing, and these clients are clients that are chosen by our students. So like I mentioned in the discussion, if maybe you're trying to get a foothold in social marketing, or maybe you're switching careers, or maybe you're just trying to find that entrance point to a particular organization. Being a part of this program really gives a lot of credibility to our students. So they are able to say, hey, I'm a graduate student. I am looking to partner with a client for this particular project. And so in that way, you're able to really build portfolio pieces within whichever area of communication you're interested in and work with those organizations of personal interest. And not only does this help you really build a portfolio, but it also helps you to grow your network while you're in school and get one-on-one face time with maybe some of the organizations that you're interested in working with. And like I mentioned, you're applying the communication concepts in real time. So the themes that are touched on within each project sequence are themes that you're applying immediately to your project with your client. And so it's not just learning about rhetoric, but rather learning about the foundations of rhetoric and how rhetoric can inform the communications that you put together in a particular project with a particular goal for a particular client. And this is what you're building throughout the entire program. And so while this program is in strategic communication, it's not a traditional social marketing program, there is definitely a social marketing application to it. You're learning, like I mentioned before, you're really learning a process of how to approach any process or issue or project strategically. Being able to be grounded in evidence-based concepts, grounded in research as to what the situation is at the time, and being guided by the goals for the project. You learn how to adapt messages to audiences using evidence-based approaches, like I said, and you're really able to build on the concepts not only presented within the themes of the sequence, but also concepts that are specific to your particular project. So you're able to really build in a huge breadth of content into this real-world application. And like I mentioned before, it also helps you build that network of clients and contacts in social marketing. So that's kind of the high-level bird's eye view of the program. And if you would like to find out more information, you can visit our website at westminstercollege.edu/MSc. You're also free to email me as well at dcaldwell@westminstercollege.edu.
Thank you, Danielle. So let's move on then to Q&A. We'll start with the first question. And by the way, if you have questions for any of the speakers, you can put them in as long as you put in after it who it's for. We still have some questions lined up for Doug, and we have a little bit of time left at the end here, so we're going to go back to those too. But we're going to start with the ones for Danielle, and I would encourage you to ask your questions if you have any at this time. But let us know who they're for. So Danielle, will I make enough money as a social marketer to justify the expense of the program?
That's always the no pun intended, $1,000,000 question, right? Of, you know, is the investment in the education really worth the payoff at the end? And I tend to believe that, you know, if you're in it for just trying to get practical experience in social marketing and you really just want to build professional experience, maybe a degree program isn't the right choice. However, if you're really wanting to, if you love the process of learning and you're really wanting to grapple with a lot of these concepts and really get very in-depth with it, you know, I think that you can't really assign a monetary value to that educational process. And so it just kind of depends on what you're looking for. And like I mentioned before, if you really want to get a lot of foundational knowledge and a really robust understanding of how to approach communication strategically, I think it's a good fit for you.
What are the prerequisites for getting into the program?
You have to hold an undergraduate degree. We accept,
now, when you say an undergraduate degree, I just want to clarify because she's asked, undergraduate business degree, does it have to have marketing coursework? Will any degree do?
Any degree will do. We have accepted, we get a lot of people with backgrounds in the social sciences. We've had people with backgrounds in public health. We have had traditional marketing students who have taken, you know, business marketing or communication marketing programs. So anything, there is no limitation on what your undergraduate degree has to be in.
Okay, good to know. Can you give an example of, well, actually, I guess I want to broaden that question, which is what kinds of people come to the program and what kinds of projects have they worked on?
Yeah, that's a great question. We get a very diverse group of people into this program. We get people who are kind of from more traditional communication lines who are interested in, you know, PR or marketing. We've also had people come from, we've had a few people working with city governments that are trying to apply social marketing techniques to their governance. We've had people come from public health who want to really expand on their toolkit for how to communicate with audiences. And I think that is actually a benefit. You know, while if you're really wanting to hone down on just social marketing, you know, some of the other programs that have been presented in this webinar sound really great for that. And this one is a bit broader for communication, but I think that the benefit in that is that you are surrounded by people who have diverse interests within the field, and I think that has really created a lot of really productive learning environments that people can learn from each other, and what this person is doing in traditional marketing can apply to what this person is doing in PR and social marketing. And also something I forgot to mention is there is a team aspect to this. And so each sequence features a team project as well, so you're able to build that network and have those conversations with people with diverse interests. Does that answer the question?
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So I'll just then remind people, if you want more information on Westminster or any of the other programs we've talked about today, you can go to this URL. And I'll remind you, it's because I saw something in here. Wynn has put in fact, the actual course info. It's not course information, it's course info. And it has to be as it's written in terms of capitals and so on. You want to have the same font or capitalization as you're going through. Case matters. And so we do have, I guess I thought this was going to be the one for the, yes it is, all of the speakers, here we are. So we're taking questions for everybody at this point, and Doug's questions are still remaining, so I'm going to go back to them. From Hello?
We're here.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, I don't think Nevin's on the call anymore.
I see that, okay. Although that is the only way to give him his answers. I guess unless we sent them back in again. But let's see. Yes, and you've already answered Saud's as well, I see, Doug.
Mm-hmm. I tried to answer Nevin's, but I wasn't able to because he's not on the call.
I see, okay, right. I'm just reading it again, teach about integrating in low. So I think we've basically then covered those questions. We don't need to end it. We're 6 minutes early at this point. If anyone has any remaining questions for any of the speakers, we'll take them at this point. Otherwise, I would like to once again say, when you do leave, you'll see the where it allows you to enter a few words about how it went for you, and we really would appreciate it if you would say something. This is our first time doing this course fair webinar, and we'd like to know how it worked for all of you. So please do let us know.
Jay, if I might jump in, this is Danielle Caldwell again.
Sure.
I see a question from Debbie DeLong about ensuring student projects deliver useful results. And I just did want to touch on that we do have, we focus a lot on evaluation throughout each of the sequences. There is a huge evaluative component to all of the projects. Additionally, we as faculty reach out and solicit feedback from the clients as well so that we know how our students are doing out in the real world. So yes, there is an evaluative component to what the students have to build into the projects in terms of, measuring effectiveness or ROI, like you said, and there's also an evaluative aspect that the faculty builds in to make sure that our clients are getting what they need from our students.
Great, thanks for catching that. Danielle?
Yeah.
No, I was saying thank you. Thank you for catching that. Anything else in terms of leftovers? Any questions people have? Okay, well then I think we better move on to our closing. I'd like to say that the, if I can get up, or let me see. Yes, so once again, thanks to all the participants in today's webinar. As you leave, I'll remind you once more time, you will be offered the opportunity to fill out a short evaluation form, and we depend on your answers when developing our upcoming webinars, and also for promotional text. So please let us know what's working and what you'd like us to do differently in the future, and that you have to tell us that you're willing for us to use your comments for promotional text. We won't do it unless you do. Also remind you that we have every 2 months we have a webinar coming up, and our next two in the series, the first up is Narrative Practices in Social Marketing, a case study on energy efficiency with Ross Gordon from Macquarie University in Australia. That's on August the 11th and 12th, depending on where you're located, followed by In Motion, using community-based social marketing to reduce driving and greenhouse gas emissions, with Sunny Knott from King County Metro, and that's the United States, on September the 27th. Finally, thanks to Wynn, who's helped make these webinars an important part of ISMA's member offerings. Wynn, over to you.
Thanks, and there's a good picture of Jay all dressed up. I want to thank you, Jay. And you make it a pleasure to be part of a webinar today. You make it seem really easy. But I know you spend a lot of time on organizing the program, and all of us appreciate it. And Matthew, Doug, Peter, Jay, Danielle, thank you for your presentations on internationally relevant social marketing education opportunities. I hope we can have you back for another webinar in our future webinar series. And to our members and our participants in today's webinar, thank you for your continued support and your participation. We do hope to see you in our next webinar, Narrative Practices in Social Marketing with Ross Gordon. And until then, keep visiting the ISMA website. Share your events on our calendar, exchange resources, keep up with our Career Center. If you like, even add to our blog. And until then, we'll say this is the International Social Marketing Association. We now conclude today's webinar.